3 weeks ago, I pulled into my daughter Simone's driveway in Richmond, Virginia. The October maples along her street were burning gold and crimson, and the late afternoon sun threw long shadows across the sidewalk. I had not told her I was coming. I wanted to surprise my wife, Mabel, who had been staying with Simone for nearly a month now. I missed her. 43 years of marriage, and the house in Charlottesville still felt wrong without her in it. I was halfway up the front walk, my hand already reaching toward the porch railing, when a man came running from the house next door. He was moving fast for someone his age, crossing the lawn in long strides, his arms raised like he was trying to flag down a plane. "Stop," he shouted. "Sir, stop right there. Do not go inside that house." I froze. He reached me in seconds, breathing hard. He was a black man, mid-60s, lean but solid, with close-cropped gray hair and the kind of posture that only comes from decades of discipline. His hand closed around my forearm with a grip that surprised me. "I already called the police," he said, his voice low and urgent. "They are on their way. 2 minutes, maybe less." My heart slammed against my ribs. "That is my daughter's house," I said. "My wife is in there." "Mabel, what happened? What did you hear?" He looked back at the house. The front door was closed. The curtains were drawn. Everything looked normal, peaceful, a suburban home on a quiet autumn afternoon. But his face told a different story. "It started about 8 minutes ago," he said. "Yelling. Loud. A woman's voice first, then another woman, then a man. Then I heard something heavy go over. Glass breaking. And then one of the women screamed." He looked me dead in the eyes. "Not a yell, sir. A scream. The kind that only means one thing." "Who screamed?" I demanded, trying to pull free. "Which woman?" He held fast. I could not tell. But after the scream, I heard the man's voice. He was shouting something. And then it went quiet. Dead quiet. His jaw tightened. That is when I called. The sirens hit the air then, distant but closing fast. My mind was spinning, grasping for something solid to hold on to. Mabel was 68 years old. She was a retired nurse, gentle as morning light. She had come here to take care of Simone after what Simone had told us was a severe sprain. She was supposed to be safe. And the man in that house. There was only one man it could be. Ethan Reed, my son-in-law. The man I had never trusted. The man I had watched my brilliant daughter shrink beside for 6 years. The sirens were deafening now. 2 Richmond police cruisers tore around the corner and screeched to a halt, angling across the street. 4 officers emerged, weapons drawn but pointed down. "What is the situation?" The lead officer barked, approaching us. My neighbor released my arm and pointed. Violent altercation inside. Glass breaking. Woman screamed for help. Gone silent since. At least 3 people inside. "My wife is in there," I said, my voice cracking. "Mabel Palmer. She is 68 years old." The officers moved up the walkway, stacking on either side of the door. The lead officer pounded his fist against the wood. "Richmond police. Open the door." Silence. Heavy, terrible silence. "Police. Open the door now, or we are coming in." Nothing. Not a sound. Not a movement behind those drawn curtains. I could not breathe. For 32 years I had sat on the bench of the Charlottesville Circuit Court. I had heard testimony that would curdle your blood. I had sentenced men who had done unspeakable things. But nothing in those 3 decades had prepared me for the feeling of standing on my daughter's lawn, listening to silence, and knowing in my bones that something was horribly, irreversibly wrong. "Breach it," the lead officer said. His partner stepped back and drove his boot into the frame just beside the deadbolt. The wood cracked but held. He kicked again. The frame splintered. On the 3rd kick, the door flew inward, slamming against the wall with a sound that punched through me like a verdict. They disappeared inside. One left, one right. "Clear," I heard. Then silence again. I did not wait. I could not wait. I ran past the officer on the porch, past my neighbor's outstretched hand. I heard someone shout, "Sir, stay back." But I was already through the splintered doorframe. The smell hit me first. Copper, iron, blood. The foyer was chaos. A tall floor lamp lay shattered across the hardwood, its shade crumpled like paper. A side table was overturned, its drawer spilling contents across the floor. Shards of glass from what looked like a framed photograph crunched under my shoes. "In here!" A female officer's voice called from beyond the staircase. I ran toward the sound. My old knees screamed in protest, but I did not feel them. I rounded the corner into the living room, and then my entire world, everything I had built, everything I believed, every verdict I had ever rendered, collapsed into nothing. Mabel, my Mabel. She was lying at the bottom of the staircase. Her body was twisted at an angle that no body should ever be. Her eyes were closed, her face gray. A dark pool of blood was spreading slowly from beneath her head, creeping across the beige tile like a sentence being written in real time. "Oh God," I heard myself say. Or maybe I only thought it. I do not know. My legs went weak. I caught myself on the banister, my fingers white around the polished wood. The female officer was kneeling beside her, two fingers pressed to Mabel's neck. "I have got a pulse," she called out. "Faint. She is breathing. Get the medics in here now." Breathing. She was breathing. The word broke something open inside my chest that I did not know had been locked. I fell to my knees on the cold tile, the impact jarring my 70-year-old bones. I reached for her hand. That hand I had held 10,000 times. I saw the simple gold band on her finger, the one I had placed there 43 years ago in a small church in Charlottesville. "Mabel," I whispered. The voice that came out was not mine. It was the voice of a man who had just watched his whole life shatter on a tile floor. "Baby, I am here." "Sir, do not touch her," the officer commanded. "Paramedics are 30 seconds out. We cannot move her." I knelt there, helpless, 2 feet from the love of my life, staring at the blood matting her beautiful gray hair, staring at the unnatural angle of her neck against the bottom step. This was not a fall. Mabel might trip on a garden hose, sure. She might stumble on a wet floor, but she would not shatter a lamp. She would not overturn a table. This was violence. This was rage, directed at a 68-year-old woman who had never raised her hand against another soul in her life. My eyes stung. I refused to let the tears fall. I was a judge. I was Howard Palmer. I did not cry, but my gaze drifted, pulled by something. Mabel's right hand was outstretched, palm up, fingers slightly curled. She was reaching for something. I followed the line of her arm across the tile. There, about 18 inches from her fingertips, lay a piece of paper, crumpled, spotted with blood. It looked official somehow, like a document, not a letter. The edge of a notary seal was just visible beneath a dark red smear. I did not know what it was. Not then. But I would. And when I did, it would destroy everything I thought I knew about my family, about my daughter, and most of all, about the man I had spent 6 years hating for all the wrong reasons. Then I heard it. A sound from above. A ragged, gulping sob that echoed down the stairwell like a wounded animal. I lifted my head. My eyes traveled up the stairs, past the dark smear on the 3rd step where Mabel's head must have struck, past the scuffed banister, up to the 2nd floor landing. Simone. My daughter was pressed into the corner at the top of the stairs. Her knees were drawn tight to her chest, her arms wrapped around herself, her entire body shaking with violent sobs. Her hair, usually immaculate, hung in wild tangles across her face. Mascara ran in black rivers down her cheeks. "Simone," I called out, my voice finally finding its power. "Baby, what happened? Are you hurt?" She lifted her head. Her face was a mask of terror, her eyes wide and bloodshot, her lips trembling so badly she could barely form words. She did not look at me. She looked past me, her gaze fixed on something at the far end of the landing. Then her arm shot out. Her finger extended, trembling violently, pointing at a figure standing near the hallway entrance, just 15 feet from where she cowered. "Him!" she screamed. The sound tore through the house like breaking glass. "He did it. He threw her down the stairs. He tried to kill Mama." I followed her trembling finger. My head snapped around. And there he was. Ethan Reed, my son-in-law. He was standing near the hallway wall, one hand braced against the doorframe as if he might collapse without it. His other arm hung at his side, and I could see it clearly, even from below. A long, ragged cut ran from his elbow to his wrist, blood soaking through the torn sleeve of his flannel shirt. His right wrist was swollen to nearly twice its normal size, already turning a deep purple. His face was blank, stunned, his mouth opening and closing, but producing no sound. He looked like a man who had just been hit by a truck and had not yet realized he was still standing. The male officer was already taking the stairs 2 at a time, his weapon raised. "Sir, show me your hands. Both hands now." Ethan did not seem to register him. He just stood there, swaying slightly, staring down at the scene below, staring at Mabel. "Hands!" the officer roared. Ethan slowly raised both arms. The movement made him wince, the swollen wrist clearly causing him agony. Blood dripped from his forearm onto the hardwood floor. The officer spun him against the wall, face first. The crack of Ethan's cheekbone against the plaster made me flinch. "You have the right to remain silent." "No," Ethan whispered. It was the first sound he had made. His voice was hoarse, barely audible. "No, she is lying." "I did not." "Shut your mouth," the officer commanded, wrenching Ethan's arms behind his back. The swollen wrist twisted, and Ethan let out a sharp cry of pain. The handcuffs clicked shut, with a sound that rang through the stairwell, like a gavel falling. That sound broke me open. The shock drained away, and in its place came fire. Pure, white-hot, righteous fury. The kind I had not felt since I was a young man. The kind that makes you forget you are 70 years old with bad knees and a heart that skips beats when you climb stairs too fast. "You!" I roared, pushing myself up from the floor. My knees screamed, but I did not care. "You worthless piece of trash! You did this to her." I lunged for the stairs. I was going to get my hands on him. I was going to make him pay for every drop of my wife's blood on that tile floor. But Clarence was suddenly there. My neighbor had followed me inside, and now his arms were around my chest, a bear hug from behind, pinning my arms to my sides. "No, sir," Clarence said, his voice low and firm in my ear. "Let them handle it. Do not do something you cannot undo." "He tried to kill her," I screamed, fighting against Clarence's grip. "He tried to kill my wife." They were dragging Ethan down the stairs now, his feet stumbling on each step. The officer's hand clamped on the back of his neck. As they reached the bottom, as they passed within 10 feet of where Mabel lay, Ethan's eyes found mine. He was not looking at Simone. He was looking directly at me. "Howard," he said, and his voice was desperate, cracking, frantic. "Howard, please. It was not me. Check her trading account. Check Simone's trading account. She has been—" "Liar!" Simone shrieked from the top of the stairs. "You monster! You tried to kill my mother. Please!" Ethan was being dragged through the foyer now, his feet scraping the hardwood, glass crunching under his heels. "The trading account. Howard. She is lying. She has been lying for—" The front door slammed. The sound cut off his words like a blade. I stood there in the ruined living room, chest heaving, body shaking. Clarence still had a steadying hand on my shoulder. Above me, Simone was collapsing onto the upstairs carpet, her sobs echoing through the house. And Mabel, my Mabel, was still lying on that cold tile as paramedics finally rushed through the broken doorframe with a stretcher and equipment bags. Trading account. What kind of nonsense was that? The man was a cornered animal, desperate, spitting out anything he could think of to shift blame. I knew this pattern. I had seen it 100 times from behind the bench. The guilty always reach for the wildest deflection in their final moments of freedom. It was pathetic. It was predictable. My daughter was the victim. My wife was the victim. And Ethan Reed was exactly what I had always known he was. A quiet, cowardly, violent man hiding behind soft smiles and sawdust-covered hands. I knew it. I knew it in my bones. But even as I told myself this, even as the certainty hardened like concrete in my chest, something nagged, a splinter I could not identify. As the paramedics worked over Mabel, as they stabilized her neck and lifted her gently onto the stretcher, I found my eyes drawn back to the stairs, to the landing above. Simone was still there, still crying, still trembling, the perfect image of a traumatized daughter. But for one instant, just one, as the paramedics carried Mabel past the bottom of the stairs, Simone's eyes had dropped. They moved away from the stretcher, away from her mother's pale face, and landed on that crumpled piece of paper still lying on the tile, the blood-spotted document that Mabel had been reaching for. And in that instant, her expression shifted. It was so fast I almost missed it. The grief, the terror, the hysteria, all of it flickered, like a television losing signal. And beneath it, just for a heartbeat, I saw something else. Calculation. Cold, sharp, assessing calculation. The look of a mind running numbers, weighing options, determining the next move. Then it was gone. She looked up, caught my eyes, and the sobbing daughter was back. Tears streaming, hands shaking. "Daddy," she whimpered. "Daddy, I am so scared." "I am here, baby girl," I said. The words came automatically. I am here. But somewhere in the basement of my mind, in the part that had spent 32 years reading faces from the bench, something filed that moment away. Something logged it without my permission. I would not remember it for days. But when I did, it would be the first crack in the foundation of everything I believed. I had hated Ethan Reed from the moment my daughter brought him through my front door 6 years ago. I need you to understand that. I need you to understand the depth of it, the certainty of it, because without that understanding, nothing that follows will make sense. My hatred was not casual. It was not a passing discomfort. It was a conviction, rendered with the same absolute certainty I had brought to 32 years of verdicts from the bench of the Charlottesville Circuit Court. Simone was everything I had built my life to produce. Valedictorian, Georgetown law, top of her class. She had my mind, my sharpness, my ability to walk into a room and immediately identify who was lying and who was telling the truth. She was a Palmer. She was my legacy in human form, and she brought home a carpenter. Ethan Reed was 32 years old the first time I shook his hand. White, working class. Grew up in some small town in the Shenandoah Valley, son of a mechanic and a school lunch lady. He had calluses on his palms thick as leather. He smelled faintly of sawdust and wood stain. He had started as a framing carpenter at 19, and, I will give him this much, had built himself into a general contractor with his own small company by the time Simone found him. But I did not care about his company. I did not care about his truck or his tools or his polite yes sir and no sir. What I saw was a man who was not good enough. What I saw was a man with dirt under his fingernails, sitting at my dinner table, eating off my wife's good china, daring to touch my daughter's hand like he belonged there. My father would have seen it the same way. Judge Raymond Palmer, who sat on the same bench I inherited, who spent 41 years in that courtroom before me. My father was a hard man, brilliant, unforgiving. He taught me early that there were two kinds of men in this world: men who built their lives with their minds, and men who built their lives with their backs. The first kind led, the second kind followed, and never, ever, should the two be confused. A man who works with his hands, my father told me once, straightening his tie in the mirror before court, is a man who could not figure out how to work with his head. Remember that, Howard. We are not laborers. We are thinkers. That is what separates us. I carried those words like scripture. They shaped every judgment I made, on the bench and off it. And when Ethan Reed walked into my house with his calloused hands, and his soft voice, and his working man's shoulders, I heard my father's voice as clearly as if he were standing beside me. Not good enough. Not smart enough. Not one of us. But it was more than class. It was more than his hands or his background. It was his silence. Ethan was quiet. Devastatingly, infuriatingly quiet. He sat at family dinners and listened. He nodded. He smiled that small, closed-lipped smile that I could never read. He never argued. He never pushed back. When Simone spoke, he watched her with an expression I interpreted as blank submission. I had spent 32 years reading defendants from the bench. The loud ones, the ones who screamed their innocence, they were usually telling the truth. It was the quiet ones who worried me. The ones who sat perfectly still, who never raised their voices, who let their lawyers do the talking. Those were the ones hiding something. Those were the dangerous ones. Ethan was quiet. Therefore, Ethan was hiding something. Therefore, Ethan was dangerous. The logic was clean. The logic was absolute. The logic was wrong. Mabel saw it differently. She always did. "He is a good man, Howard," she would say, usually after I had made some cutting remark about his truck, or his tools, or his lack of a proper degree. "He is kind. He is patient. He loves Simone. He is weak," I would reply. "He lets her walk all over him. He never disagrees with her. He never challenges her. A man who cannot stand up to his own wife is not a man at all." Mabel would just look at me with those calm brown eyes that had seen too much in 35 years of nursing. "Maybe," she would say, "he just loves her differently than you love me." I dismissed it. I always dismissed it. I knew what I saw. I was Judge Howard Palmer. Reading people was my profession, my gift, my calling. 6 months ago, Simone and Ethan had moved from their old apartment to this house in Richmond. A bigger place, colonial style. 2 stories with a wide staircase and a bay window in the living room. Ethan had done most of the renovation himself, the floors, the kitchen, the porch railing. I remember walking through it the first time and thinking, he builds houses because he could not build anything else. Then 4 weeks ago, Simone called. Her voice was thin, strained. "Mama, I need you," she had said to Mabel. "I had a bad sprain. A really bad one. I cannot get around the house. I need help." Something about it felt thin to me. A sprain. A grown woman calling her mother across the state for a sprain. But Mabel did not hesitate. She packed a bag that same night. "You worry too much, Howard," she said, kissing my cheek at the door. "She needs her mother. That is all." But in our last phone call, 3 days before I drove to Richmond, Mabel's voice was different. Tight. Controlled. The way she used to sound when she was on shift in the trauma unit and could not show panic in front of her patients. "Everything is fine, Howard," she said. "Just let me handle this. Simone needs me right now." "Handle what?" I had wanted to ask. "Handle what, Mabel? What is happening in that house that requires handling?" But Mabel was a private woman. She carried things alone. It was how she was built. She processed the world internally, sorted it, filed it, and only showed you the finished version. I trusted her. In 43 years of marriage, I had never had a reason not to. Now, sitting in the back of an ambulance watching paramedics load my wife's stretcher into the vehicle, I felt that trust curdle into something sour. I should have driven down sooner. I should have pushed harder. I should have trusted my gut instead of her reassurances. The sprain was a lie. I knew that now with absolute certainty. Mabel had not been here for any sprain. She had been here for something else, something darker, something that had ended with her body twisted at the bottom of a staircase. And Ethan Reed, that quiet, soft-spoken, sawdust-scented man, with his empty smiles and his calloused hands, was responsible. I had known it the day I met him. I had known it in the courtroom of my gut, where I had tried and convicted him 6 years ago without so much as hearing his defense. Now my wife was paying for my daughter's mistake in marrying him. Or so I believed. With every fiber, with every cell, with the same certainty I had brought to 3 decades of guilty verdicts. I was catastrophically, devastatingly, unforgivably wrong. The fluorescent lights of VCU Medical Center hummed like a verdict I could not escape. It was the only sound in that waiting room, a low, relentless drone that burrowed into my skull and would not let go. 6 hours. 6 hours since I watched them wheel Mabel through those double doors. Her face pale as parchment, her beautiful gray hair still matted dark with blood. The doctor was young. Too young. He used words that sounded like they belonged in a textbook, not in a conversation with a man whose wife was dying. Severe cranial trauma. Intracranial pressure. Medically induced coma to reduce swelling. Possible subdural hematoma. He spoke carefully, clinically, and all I could hear behind his words was the hum. That endless fluorescent hum. I was sitting on a plastic chair that felt like it had been carved from stone. The waiting room was nearly empty. A television mounted in the corner played the news on mute, the scrolling ticker meaningless, the anchors' mouths moving without sound. The vending machine in the corner buzzed in harmony with the lights, as if the entire building was conspiring to produce one unified tone of misery. Beside me, Simone was curled into herself. Her legs were pulled up onto the chair, her arms wrapped around her knees, her face buried. She had not stopped crying since we arrived. Her body shook with each sob, silent now but constant, a tremor that ran through her like an electrical current that would not stop. I put my arm around her. I pulled her close. She felt small, fragile, like the little girl who used to crawl into my lap during thunderstorms. "It is going to be okay, baby girl," I whispered. The words tasted hollow. My wife was in surgery with her skull cracked open. Nothing was going to be okay. Dad. Her voice came out raw, scraped thin by hours of crying. She pulled back just enough to look at me. Her eyes were swollen, bloodshot, pleading. "I have to tell you something. I should have told you weeks ago. I am so ashamed." I held her tighter. "Whatever it is not your fault. None of this is your fault, Simone." "But it is," she insisted. Her hands gripped my sleeve like a child afraid of being swept away. I let it happen. I watched it happen. I was too scared to stop it. "Tell me," I said. She took a ragged breath. Her eyes dropped to the floor. "Ethan," she whispered. "He has a sickness, Dad. A gambling sickness. Except it is not cards or horses. It is trading. Cryptocurrency. Day trading. Those apps on his phone." The words settled between us. Trading. Crypto. And something in my chest clicked. It made a terrible, perfect sense. The way Ethan had seemed stressed these past months. The weight loss. The dark circles I had noticed at Christmas. That haunted look behind his eyes that I had interpreted as guilt. Of course. Of course it was gambling. A working man chasing easy money because his hands were not enough. "How bad?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. $200,000. The number fell out of her like a stone. Gone. In 18 months. He drained our joint savings. Then he opened credit cards. Then he... She could not finish. A fresh sob broke through. $200,000. I felt the blood leave my face. I gripped the armrest of my chair so hard the plastic groaned. That was not just their money. Mabel and I had given them $40,000 2 years ago to help with the down payment on the Richmond house. Our money. Our retirement savings. Carved away and gifted with love. Gone. "I found out about 5 weeks ago," Simone continued, the words pouring out now like water through a broken dam. "I found the statements. The accounts on his phone. These trading platforms with ridiculous names. He had been doing it in secret, during work, on his lunch breaks, at night when I was asleep. I confronted him. She pulled at a tissue, shredding it between her fingers. He broke down. He cried. He promised me it was over. He swore he would get help. He begged me not to tell you. Of course he did, I muttered. The quiet coward. Too ashamed to face me. Too weak to face his own failures. He said he could not stand the thought of you knowing. He said you already thought he was worthless, and this would prove it. She looked at me, and there was something in her eyes. An accusation, gentle but unmistakable. He was terrified of you, Dad. I absorbed this. Yes, I had never hidden my opinion of Ethan Reed. I had made my judgment clear at every holiday dinner, every birthday, every phone call. He knew where he stood with me, and apparently that knowledge had been just enough pressure to keep him lying, hiding, spiraling deeper into his addiction rather than asking for help. Good. He should have been terrified. And the sprain? I asked. The reason your mother came down here? Simone's face crumpled. She turned away from me, her shame filling the air between us like heat from an open oven. There was no sprain, Dad. What? I lied, she whispered. I made it up. I was desperate. The money was gone. All of it. I was terrified of what he might do when the last credit card bounced. I needed Mama. I needed someone here. I did not know who else to call. So Mabel had walked into a trap. Not knowingly, not by her own choice, but lured by a daughter's lie into a house where a desperate man was cornered with his sins exposed. My wife, the fixer, the healer, the woman who spent 35 years running toward emergencies rather than away from them, had walked straight into a crisis she did not know existed. She figured it out, Simone cried, hiding her face in her hands. She is too smart, Dad. She found the bank statements in his desk drawer. She found the notices from the credit card companies. This afternoon she confronted him. Simone's voice cracked. I was upstairs. I heard them shouting. By the time I got downstairs, Mama was holding the statements in his face. She was telling him he was a thief, that she was going to call the police. And? I pressed. My hands were shaking. He just snapped. Simone's voice dropped to a horrified whisper. He grabbed her arm. He yelled at her to mind her own business. She tried to reach for the phone. And she could not say it. She buried her face and her shoulders convulsed. He pushed her, Daddy. He pushed Mama so hard. With both hands. She flew backward. She hit the stairs. And she did not get up. I sat there, rigid. Every muscle in my body had turned to iron. My mind was painting the picture in high definition. My wife, 68 years old, 130 pounds, confronting a desperate man about stolen money. And that man, that quiet, calculating man I had never trusted, putting both hands on her chest and shoving her into oblivion. I held Simone while she cried. I rocked her like she was 4 years old again, afraid of the dark, but my eyes were open, my jaw was set, and behind my ribs, a cold, clean fury was building. Not rage. Something worse. Certainty. I had been right about Ethan Reed from the beginning. My gut had known. 32 years of reading criminals. And I had spotted him on day one. The quiet ones. Always the quiet ones. Then a new voice entered the waiting room. Judge Palmer. I looked up. A man in a rumpled gray suit was standing a few feet away, a badge clipped to his belt, a small notebook in his hand. He was mid-40s, Latino, with tired eyes that had seen too many nights like this one. I am Detective Reyes, he said. Richmond homicide. I need to ask you and your daughter a few questions. Detective Reyes did not sit down. He stood there with his notebook open, his pen clicking slowly against the spiral binding, his eyes moving between Simone and me with the unhurried patience of a man who had done this 1,000 times. Your daughter gave a preliminary statement at the scene, he said, his voice neutral. I just need to clarify a few points. You both stated that your son-in-law, Ethan Reed, pushed Mrs. Palmer down the stairs during a confrontation about finances. Is that correct? That is correct, I said. My voice was firm. The voice I had used from the bench for 3 decades. My daughter witnessed the entire thing. Reyes nodded slowly, writing something in his notebook. And Mr. Reed's injuries. The laceration on his forearm. The swollen wrist. Your daughter stated those occurred during the altercation, that Mrs. Palmer may have fought back before the push. I looked at Simone. She nodded, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Mama tried to push him away. She was holding the bank statements. She swung at him. He grabbed her wrists, and then he just overpowered her. Reyes wrote this down without expression. Then he closed his notebook. But he did not leave. He stood there for a moment, and something in the quality of his silence made me uneasy. It was the silence of a man choosing his next words carefully. I recognized it. I had watched prosecutors do it before delivering a piece of evidence they knew would change the complexion of a case. Judge Palmer, he said, I want to be straightforward with you. out of professional courtesy. Go ahead. We have a conflicting account. I felt Simone stiffen beside me. Conflicting from whom? I asked. From Ethan? You cannot possibly be giving weight to anything that man. No, sir, not from Mr. Reed. Reyes met my eyes. From your neighbor, Mr. Clarence Odom, the man who called 911. I frowned. What about him? Mr. Odom is a retired sound engineer. Worked in professional recording studios for 30 years. He states that his hearing is his livelihood and that he is trained to identify and distinguish voices in complex audio environments. Reyes paused, letting this settle. He is very clear about what he heard, Judge. Very specific. And what does he claim he heard? Reyes flipped back a page in his notebook. He says he heard the argument. He confirms that. Multiple voices, escalating volume. But he says he distinctly heard a male voice, which he attributes to Mr. Reed, shouting the words, "Simone, stop, you are hurting her." Reyes looked up from the page. He also says he heard the male voice yell, "Give me the phone. I have to call 911. The words hung in the air between us. I stared at the detective. Beside me, Simone had gone very, very still. That is impossible, I said. He is confused. He must have the voices mixed up. He was hearing through walls, in the middle of chaos. Of course, he got it backward. Perhaps, Reyes said, his face unreadable. But there is more, Judge. More. We ran Mr. Reed's background. He is clean. Not so much as a parking ticket. No history of violence. No restraining orders. No complaints. Nothing. He paused. He has never been arrested before today. First time for everything, I said, hearing the edge in my own voice. Yes, sir. Reyes shifted his weight slightly. His eyes moved to Simone, then back to me. We also ran your daughter's background, Judge. Standard procedure. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. I felt it in my spine. And? Your daughter has a sealed juvenile record. A shoplifting charge from when she was 16. Misdemeanor. It was expunged when she turned 18. I stood up. The plastic chair screeched against the linoleum. Now you listen to me, detective. My voice was low, controlled. The voice that had silenced entire courtrooms. Are you standing in front of me right now? In this hospital, while my wife is in a medically induced coma, trying to suggest that my daughter, a practicing attorney with a spotless record, is somehow the aggressor here, based on a shoplifting charge from when she was a child? Reyes did not flinch. He was good. He had been yelled at before. I am not suggesting anything, Judge. I am sharing information. It is what I do. What you should be doing, I said, taking a step toward him, is making sure that man stays in a cell. I was a judge for 32 years, detective. I have read more faces, heard more lies, and delivered more verdicts than you have had hot dinners. I know guilt. I have spent my life studying it, and I am telling you that man is guilty. Reyes held my gaze. Steady. Professional. Unbothered. Understood. Judge Palmer. He turned to leave. Took 2 steps. Then stopped. Turned back. One more thing, he said. Mr. Odom mentioned something else. He said he did not just hear the altercation. He paused, and I saw something flicker in his tired eyes. Something that might have been concern, or might have been pity. He said he recorded it. Professional-grade equipment. He says he has the entire incident on tape. I almost laughed. A hobby microphone on an old man's porch, I said, waving my hand dismissively. You are going to base your investigation on that? On some neighbor's eavesdropping equipment? Reyes just looked at me. He says it is a Neumann U-87, Judge, studio condenser microphone. He says he has been a certified expert audio witness in 14 federal and state court cases. Something cold moved through my stomach. I ignored it. Good night, detective, I said. Good night, Judge. He turned and walked away, his footsteps fading down the sterile corridor, his radio squawking softly at his hip. I sat back down. My heart was hammering. Not with grief now. With anger. How dare he? How dare this mid-level detective walk into a hospital and try to muddy the waters? Try to plant doubt. Try to twist a clear case of domestic violence into something ambiguous. I looked at Simone. She was trembling, smaller than ever, her tissue shredded into confetti on her lap. "He thinks I did it," she whispered. "No, he does not," I said, pulling her against my shoulder. My voice was granite. "He is fishing. That is all. Lazy detective work. Looking for an easy shortcut instead of building a proper case." I kissed the top of her head. "Do not worry, baby girl. I am here. I will not let anyone touch you. I believe you." And I did. God help me. I did. With every cell in my body, I believed my daughter. She settled against me. Her breathing slowed. Within 20 minutes, exhaustion pulled her under, and she was asleep on my shoulder, her face still damp with tears. I sat there in the fluorescent hum, staring at the muted television, my arm around my sleeping daughter. The hospital was quiet around us. A nurse's shoes squeaked in the corridor. A distant elevator chimed. But in the silence, in the space between one heartbeat and the next, two words kept circling back. Circling like birds over carrion that had not yet stopped breathing. Recorded it. He recorded it. I told myself it meant nothing. An old man's hobby. Some bird-watching microphone picking up noise through walls. It would be garbled, useless, inadmissible. No judge in the state would allow it. But I had been a judge. I knew what made evidence admissible. I knew what a Neumann U-87 was worth. And I knew what 14 certified expert testimonies meant in a courtroom. I pushed the thought down. I buried it deep. I told myself it was nothing. It was not nothing. 2 days later, I went back to the house. The yellow crime scene tape was still stretched across the splintered doorframe, fluttering in the October wind. I ducked under it. The responding officer had given me permission to retrieve personal items for Mabel. A robe, her reading glasses, her worn leather slippers, small comforts for a woman lying in a medically induced coma. I moved through the house quickly. I did not look at the dark stain on the tile at the bottom of the stairs. I went upstairs, found Mabel's suitcase in the guest room, packed what she would need, and came back down. When I stepped outside into the gray afternoon, he was there, Clarence Odom, sitting on his own porch, 20 feet away, watching me with the patient stillness of a man who had been waiting for this exact moment. He stood slowly and walked across the strip of lawn between the two properties. "Judge Palmer," he said. His voice was respectful, but there was iron behind it. "Mr. Odom." I gripped the overnight bag. "I want to thank you for calling the police. You may have saved my wife's life." "I spoke to Detective Reyes," he said. "He came by yesterday. I do not think he believed me. But I have a feeling what I have to say matters more coming directly from me than secondhand from a notebook. Mr. Odom, my daughter told me everything. Ethan Reed is a crypto gambler who stole $200,000 and attacked my wife. The case is clear." He did not flinch. He stood there like an old oak, rooted and unmovable. "I have lived next door to your daughter for 3 years, Judge. I am a widower. Home most days. Windows open." He stepped closer. "I spent 30 years in recording studios. Nashville, Los Angeles, Grammy-nominated albums. My ears are my instrument. The only part of me that still works the way God intended." He tapped his left ear. "I can identify a mockingbird from a brown thrasher by one note. And I can tell you exactly who does the yelling in that house." I said nothing. In 3 years, I have heard Mr. Reed raise his voice 3 times. Once during a football game. Once when he dropped something in his garage. Once when he said, "Simone, please, not tonight." That is his maximum volume. Clarence looked at me without blinking. "Your daughter is the one who yells. Every week. Always about money. Where is it, Ethan? You promised me." And he is always the one trying to calm her. "It is okay, Simone. We will figure it out." That is the pattern, sir. 3 years. My blood ran cold. The exact inverse of everything Simone had told me. That night, I said, my voice barely controlled. What exactly did you hear? I was on my porch. Right there. He pointed to a wooden chair 14 feet from Simone's kitchen window. Recording bird songs at dusk for a soundscape project. Neumann U87 condenser microphone. Studio grade. Omnidirectional. It catches everything within 40 feet, with near-perfect clarity. He braced himself. Your wife's voice came first. Firm. She said something like, Simone, this has to stop. Then your daughter. Furious. She screamed, that money is mine. He left it for me. The rage was unlike anything I had heard from her before. My stomach turned. The ground was shifting. Then Mr. Reed. He was not calm this time. He was scared. He said, Simone, please, let us just call your father. Then I heard the crash. Furniture, glass. Clarence's jaw tightened. And then he screamed. Not yelled. Screamed. Simone, stop! You are hurting her. Then louder. Simone, get away from her. He paused. Then I heard the sound a body makes when it falls downstairs. Heavy. Awful. Final. The overnight bag slipped from my fingers onto the grass. After that, Mr. Reed. Hysterical. Oh God, Mabel, Mabel. I heard him pick up a phone. He said, I am calling 911, Simone. And then your daughter's voice. Cold. Flat. Like a different person, she said, put it down. He let the words hang. He yelled, I am calling for help. And she screamed, and this I will never forget. You will not ruin me. Then a metallic sound. Something sharp. And Mr. Reed cried out in pain. The world tilted. I thought I might be sick right there on the lawn. I called 911 30 seconds later, Clarence said, and the only voice I heard screaming, he pushed her, was your daughter's, after it was all over. After the silence, I must have staggered because his hand was suddenly at my elbow, steadying me. Judge Palmer, he said, and his voice carried the weight of a man who has testified 14 times and never once been shaken. I have that entire incident on a 48 kilohertz, 24-bit recording, studio quality. It will hold up in any courtroom in America. And I am telling you, sir, with everything I have. His eyes locked onto mine. You are convicting the wrong man. I pulled away. I grabbed the bag. I walked to my car without a word, got in, closed the door, and sat with my hands on the steering wheel, staring at the dashboard. His words followed me like a sentence delivered from a bench higher than any I had ever sat behind. You are convicting the wrong man. I told myself he was confused. I told myself he was an old man with a hobby microphone, making assumptions about a family he did not know. I told myself my daughter, my brilliant, broken, terrified daughter, had no reason to lie. But the part of me that had spent 32 years in a courtroom, the part that dealt in evidence rather than emotion, that part would not be silenced. It sat in the back of my skull, and it whispered, over and over, in Clarence Odom's calm baritone, 48 kilohertz, 24-bit, 14 expert testimonies, admissible, undeniable, devastating. Previously, Howard discovered Mabel injured at the bottom of Simone's staircase. Simone accused her husband Ethan of pushing Mabel. Detective Reyes introduced conflicting testimony. Neighbor Clarence Odom, a retired sound engineer, played back a devastating audio reconstruction, proving Simone was the aggressor. Howard left Clarence's porch shaken. The phrase, "You are convicting the wrong man," reverberating in his mind. I did not sleep that night. I sat in the guest bedroom of my own home, a room that still smelled faintly of Mabel's lavender sachets, and stared at the ceiling fan rotating in slow, useless circles. Every rotation carried Clarence's voice back to me. Admissible, undeniable, devastating. By 6 in the morning, I had made a decision that, for a man who spent 32 years on the bench, felt like treason. I called Victoria Soto. Victoria was not a friend. She was a former public defender who had appeared before me 11 times between 2004 and 2016. I had ruled against her in 9 of those cases. She was sharp, relentless, and she despised me, which meant she had no reason to lie to me or soften anything for my comfort. I needed that. I needed someone who would cut without anesthesia. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was exactly as I remembered. Clipped, efficient, slightly amused. Judge Palmer, I assume someone is dead or dying, because you would never call me otherwise. I told her everything. The staircase, the blood, Simone's accusation, Ethan's arrest, Clarence's recording. The document I had seen crumpled, near Mabel's hand, a document I had not mentioned to anyone, not even Detective Reyes, because in those first terrible hours I had forgotten it existed. Victoria listened without interrupting. When I finished, the line was silent for 4 full seconds. Then she said, I need 3 things. The name of Ethan's appointed counsel, access to the financial records of your daughter's household, and your permission to subpoena your wife's banking history. The third request stopped my breathing. Mabel's banking history? She is the victim. Howard. Victoria's voice dropped half an octave. In 32 years on the bench, how many domestic violence cases did you adjudicate? Hundreds. And in how many of those cases was the motive money? I closed my eyes. Most. Then you already know what I am about to find. You just do not want to see it yet. Victoria worked fast. Within 48 hours, she had obtained a court order granting access to Simone and Ethan's joint financial records, Simone's personal brokerage accounts, and after a brutal phone call in which I gave my reluctant consent, Mabel's savings and trust documents held at First National Bank of Virginia. She spread the results across my dining table on a Wednesday afternoon. 3 folders, 3 separate devastations. Folder 1. Simone's brokerage statements from the past 18 months. 27 leveraged crypto trades. 14 margin calls. A total net loss of $214,000, not the $200,000 Simone had claimed. She had understated her own catastrophe. Folder 2. The joint checking and savings accounts. A systematic pattern of withdrawals beginning 14 months before the incident. Small at first, 300 here, 500 there, then accelerating. 8,000 in a single week last March, 12,000 in July. The account had been drained to $411 on the day Mabel was pushed. And beside every major withdrawal, a corresponding deposit into Simone's personal brokerage. She had fed the joint account into her trading habit the way an addict feeds coins into a slot machine. But it was folder 3 that made me grip the edge of the table until my knuckles whitened. Mabel's trust account at First National, opened in September 2001. Initial deposit, $2.1 million. Source, a life insurance payout from the death of her younger brother, Lieutenant Marcus Webb, FDNY Ladder Company. 7. Who died on the 78th floor of the North Tower on September 11th. I had not known. 23 years of marriage after that date, and I had not known my wife carried $2 million in a separate account. The balance had grown to $2.6 million through conservative index funds. She had never touched the principal. She had never told me. She had never told Simone. Until 4 weeks ago. Victoria tapped the final page of the trust folder. A letter, dated 5 weeks before the incident, addressed to Simone Palmer Reed, in Mabel's handwriting. It read, My dearest Simone, I am writing to tell you something I should have shared long ago. Your Uncle Marcus left behind more than memories. I have protected this money for 23 years because I was afraid it would change us, afraid it would become a reason rather than a gift. I am coming to stay with you next week. We will talk then. I love you beyond measure. Mom, she told Simone about the money, I whispered. Victoria nodded. And 5 weeks later, your wife is at the bottom of a staircase. I pushed back from the table. The dining room felt smaller than it had ever felt. The chandelier above us, a fixture Mabel had chosen 17 years ago, cast too much light. I wanted darkness. I wanted ignorance. I wanted to return to the man I had been 72 hours earlier. the man who knew exactly who was guilty and who was innocent. Victoria gathered the folders neatly. Howard, I need to ask you one more question, and I need an honest answer. I looked at her. Did you see the document near your wife's hand that night? Yes. Did you read it? No. There was too much blood. It was a printout of this trust statement. Simone knew about the money. She knew before your wife arrived. And based on the brokerage timestamps, she lost another $41,000 in the 72 hours between receiving that letter and the night your wife fell. The word fell hung in the air like a verdict I was no longer qualified to deliver. Previously, Victoria Soto's forensic investigation revealed Simone's $214K crypto losses, a drained joint account, and Mabel's hidden $2.6 million trust a life insurance payout from her brother's death on 9/11. A letter proved Mabel told Simone about the money 5 weeks before the attack. The blood-spotted document from Task 1 was identified as a printout of the trust statement. Howard sat paralyzed as the word fell hung in the air like a verdict he could no longer deliver. I visited Mabel every day. The ICU at VCU Medical Center had a rhythm machines breathing for those who could not, nurses moving in quiet rotations, fluorescent light that never changed regardless of whether the sun outside was rising or setting. Time did not exist in that ward. Only waiting. On the 9th day, Dr. Anika Patel called me at 6:14 in the morning. Mr. Palmer, your wife is showing spontaneous eye movement. We are beginning a gradual reduction of sedation. I want to be cautious. Her intracranial pressure has stabilized, but recovery from a subdural hematoma of this severity is unpredictable. She may wake confused. She may not remember the event, or she may remember everything. I was in my car before she finished speaking. When I arrived, Mabel's eyes were half open. Not the glassy, vacant stare I had seen during the medically induced coma. These were her eyes tired, bruised by purple crescents beneath them but aware. She tracked my movement as I pulled a chair to her bedside. Her lips moved. No sound came. I leaned closer. Howard. A whisper so faint it could have been the ventilation system. I am here, I said. I took her hand. The skin was papery, threaded with IV lines, but warm, alive. You do not have to speak. She squeezed my fingers, weak but deliberate. Then her eyes moved to the door, checking, making sure we were alone. She swallowed with effort. I need to tell you, before anyone else comes. Mabel, rest. Victoria is handling. No. The word carried more force than her body should have allowed. Her monitors beeped a brief protest. You need to hear this from me. Not from a lawyer. Not from a recording. From me. I sat back. The chair creaked. Somewhere down the hall, a cart rattled past. I waited. Mabel spoke in fragments at first, pausing to breathe, to gather strength, to find words that 23 years of silence had buried deep. She told me about Marcus. About the phone call on September 12, 2001, from the FDNY Benefits Office. About the policy Marcus had taken out 6 months before the attack, $2 million, naming her as sole beneficiary because he had no wife, no children, and because she had helped him through rehab in 1998. I never told you, she said, her eyes fixed on the ceiling tiles. I was ashamed. Ashamed that I was alive and rich because my brother was dead. Ashamed that every dollar felt like blood money. I put it in a trust, and I pretended it did not exist. For 23 years, Howard, I pretended. I opened my mouth. She raised one finger barely an inch off the mattress, and I understood. She was not finished. 5 weeks ago, I wrote Simone a letter. I told her about the trust. I told her I wanted to share it, pay off her mortgage, set up college funds for future grandchildren, donate a portion to the firefighters' memorial. I thought. Her voice cracked. A single tear traced the bruise beneath her left eye. I thought it would bring us closer. What happened when you arrived? I asked. My voice did not sound like my own. It sounded like the voice I had used on the bench, measured, controlled, concealing everything beneath. Mabel closed her eyes. When she opened them again, something had hardened behind the exhaustion. She was different. From the first hour, she asked questions: how much, which bank, who else knew, whether the trust had a beneficiary clause. I thought she was excited. I thought she was planning. On the second night, I found her in the kitchen at 2 in the morning. Laptop open, trading platform, red numbers everywhere. She closed it when she saw me, but I saw enough. I saw the margin calls. I saw the withdrawals from her joint account. Mabel's heart rate climbed on the monitor. A nurse glanced through the glass partition. I held up my palm: give us a moment, and she nodded, watching. I confronted her the next morning, Mabel continued. I told her I would not release a single dollar until she closed every trading account and entered a financial counseling program. She screamed at me, called me a hypocrite, said I had no right to hide that money for 23 years, and then attached conditions. And Ethan? I asked. Mabel's expression softened. Ethan tried to calm her. He always tries. That boy has spent 6 years absorbing her rage like a sponge absorbs water, quietly, completely, until he is too heavy to hold any more. He told Simone to listen to me. He said he agreed with my conditions. That was when she turned on him. Turned on him how? She grabbed the scissors from the kitchen drawer, the long fabric shears I had brought for the curtains I was sewing. She swung at him, caught his forearm. He bled immediately. He backed away. He did not strike her. He has never struck her, Howard. Not once in 6 years. I pressed my palms flat against my thighs to stop them from trembling. Then she came for me, Mabel said. Her voice had gone flat, the tone of someone recounting a traffic accident, not their own attempted murder. She grabbed my blouse, pushed me toward the staircase. I tried to hold the railing. She pried my fingers off, one by one, and then she shoved me. I remember the first 3 steps. After that, nothing. The monitor beeped steadily. The fluorescent light hummed. Outside the glass partition, a nurse adjusted an IV bag on another patient. The world continued as though Mabel had not just dismantled every truth I had believed for 9 days. Ethan, I said. The name came out like a stone dropping into still water. Ethan tried to call 911. Yes. Mabel's eyes met mine, and Simone took the phone from his hand and threw it against the wall. Then she screamed for the neighbors. She screamed that he had pushed me. She created the story in real time, Howard. While I was bleeding at the bottom of those stairs, my daughter built her lie on top of my body. I could not speak. I sat in that plastic chair and felt 32 years of judicial certainty collapse like a condemned building, floor by floor, each one heavier than the last, until nothing remained but dust and rebar. Mabel turned her head toward me. Her bruised eyes held no accusation, only exhaustion and something I recognized from decades of marriage patience. She was waiting for me to arrive at the place she had already reached. I am sorry, I said. The words were wholly inadequate. 2 syllables against 23 years of arrogance. I know, she whispered. Then she closed her eyes and slept. Previously, Mabel woke from her coma and confessed everything to Howard: the letter about the $2.6 million trust, Simone's explosive reaction, the crypto losses, Simone attacking Ethan with fabric scissors, then pushing Mabel down the stairs and fabricating the story in real time. Howard whispered, I am sorry. And Mabel slept. Now Howard must confront the evidence that will determine whether his daughter goes free or faces justice. I left the hospital at 11:42 that morning and drove not toward home but toward Clarence Odom's house on Wisteria Lane. The drive took 14 minutes. I remember every one of them, the way the steering wheel felt foreign in my hands, the way traffic lights changed color without meaning, the way my mind kept replaying Mabel's flat, exhausted voice saying she pried my fingers off, one by one. Clarence was in his garage. The wide door was raised, and I could see him at his workbench, a long slab of reclaimed walnut surrounded by equipment I recognized only vaguely. Monitors, mixing boards, cables coiled with military precision. He looked up when my car pulled into his driveway, and set down a pair of headphones the way a surgeon sets down a scalpel, carefully, deliberately, as though even the smallest carelessness could damage something irreplaceable. Judge Palmer. He did not seem surprised. He wiped his hands on a cloth and waited for me to reach the garage entrance. "I owe you an apology," I said. He studied me for a moment, the same quiet assessment he had performed on his porch 9 days ago. Then he pulled a second stool from beneath the workbench and gestured for me to sit. "You do not owe me anything," he said. "You owe that young man sitting in Henrico County Jail." The words landed exactly where they were meant to. I accepted them without protest. "I need to hear the recording, Clarence." He did not hesitate. He turned to one of 3 monitors on his workbench, moved the mouse, and a waveform appeared on screen. A dense, jagged landscape of green peaks and valleys stretched across a timeline. The file was labeled OCT 17, 2024, 2247, Newman, U87, 48K, 24 bit WAV, 47 minutes and 13 seconds of audio. "I am going to play the relevant section," Clarence said. Approximately 9 minutes. The confrontation begins at the 22-minute mark and escalates at 28. I have isolated nothing, enhanced nothing. This is the raw capture, unedited, exactly as my microphone received it through the shared wall between our properties. He pressed play. At first, there was only ambient sound, the hum of a refrigerator, a television, playing something indistinct, the creak of floorboards under moving weight, normal domestic noise. Then Simone's voice emerged, sharp and rising. "You told her? You actually told her about the accounts?" Ethan's response was quieter, measured. She found the laptop herself. "Simone, I did not tell her anything. That money is mine. She said it was for us. For ME. She said conditions. She said counseling first. That is not unreasonable. Do not tell me what is reasonable." A crash. Glass breaking heavy, thick glass, like a vase or a lamp base shattering against tile. Then Mabel's voice, distant but audible, coming from what sounded like the top of the staircase. "Simone, please. Sit down. We can talk about this calmly." "Calmly? You hid $2 million from me for my entire life and you want me to be calm?" Footsteps. Rapid. Ascending. Then a sound that made my stomach clench, a short, sharp snick of metal. The scissors. The fabric shears Mabel had described. Ethan's voice, louder now, alarmed. "Simone, put those down, put them down." A grunt of pain. Ethan. Then his voice again, strained but controlled. "I am calling 911. This is over. Give me that phone." Simone's voice, raw with fury. A clatter, plastic against plaster. The phone hitting the wall. Then Mabel's voice. "Simone, stop. Stop this right now." What followed was the worst 9 seconds of my life. A struggle, fabric tearing. A gasp, the squeal of fingers on a wooden railing, and then a series of impacts. Heavy. Sequential. A body striking steps on its way down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 distinct thuds before a final, heavier collision at the bottom. Then silence. No, not silence. Breathing. Fast, shallow, panicked breathing from the top of the staircase. And then Simone's voice, and this was the part that drove a spike through my chest. Calm. Controlled. Calculating. "Oh God. Oh God, Ethan. What did you do?" Ethan's response was immediate, bewildered, anguished. "What did I, Simone? You pushed her. I saw you push her." "No. No. You pushed her. You pushed my mother. That is what happened. That is what I saw." "Simone." "Shut up," a door slamming. Then Simone's voice again, higher now, projecting toward windows, toward neighbors, toward the outside world. "Help. Someone help. He pushed my mother down the stairs." Clarence stopped the playback. The waveform froze. The garage fell silent, except for the faint whir of a cooling fan inside one of the monitors. I realized I was gripping the edge of the workbench with both hands. My knuckles were white. My jaw ached from clenching. I forced myself to release my fingers one at a time, the same way Mabel described Simone prying hers from the railing. "There is more," Clarence said quietly. After the screaming, you can hear Ethan attempting to descend the stairs. You can hear him reach the bottom, check for a pulse, say, "She is breathing, thank God." You can hear Simone follow him down and whisper, "Howard," not shout. "If you say one word, I will tell them you hit me too. Look at your arm. Who will they believe?" I did not ask him to play that section. I did not need to hear it. Mabel's account and Clarence's recording aligned perfectly. Two sources, independent, irrefutable. My daughter had pushed my wife down a staircase for money, then constructed a lie in less than 30 seconds and delivered it with the precision of a woman who had rehearsed deception her entire life. "Has Victoria Soto heard this?" I asked. "She was here yesterday," Clarence said. "She brought a forensic audio specialist from George Mason University, Dr. Nathan Cho. He authenticated the file, confirmed no splicing, no layering, no post-capture manipulation. Chain of custody is clean." I backed up the original to 3 separate drives the night it happened. I stood from the stool. My legs felt unreliable beneath me, as though the concrete floor had turned to sand. I walked to the garage entrance and looked across the street at my daughter's house, the colonial that Ethan had renovated with his own hands, the porch he had rebuilt, plank by plank, the front door the police had kicked open 9 days ago. "What happens now?" I asked without turning around. "Now," Clarence said, "you do what you spent 32 years doing. You let the evidence speak, and you stop convicting the innocent." I drove to Henrico County Jail that afternoon. I had never visited a defendant outside my courtroom. I had never crossed that line. But Ethan Reed was not a defendant. He was my son-in-law. He was the man who had absorbed my daughter's violence for 6 years and said nothing. He was the man I had tried to attack on the night my wife almost died. And he was innocent. Previously, Howard listened to Clarence's unedited recording, 47 minutes of audio that captured Simone's rage, the scissors attack on Ethan, Mabel's pleas, the sickening thuds of a body falling downstairs, and Simone's instant fabrication of blame. Dr. Nathan Cho authenticated the file. Howard drove to Henrico County Jail, finally accepting that Ethan was innocent. Henrico County Jail smelled exactly the way I remembered from my years as a circuit court judge. Industrial disinfectant, layered over concrete, over sweat, over the particular staleness that accumulates when hundreds of human beings are stored in a building designed to hold them rather than house them. I had sentenced men to this place. I had never sat on the visitor's side of the glass. The intake officer recognized me. I saw it in the flicker behind his eyes, the momentary straightening of posture, the half-second pause before he processed my request. Judge Howard Palmer, retired, visiting an inmate. He did not comment. He checked my identification, logged my name, and directed me to booth 7. I waited 11 minutes. I counted each one on the institutional clock above the row of partitions. A clock with no second hand, as though the architects had decided that in this place, precision was cruel. Then Ethan appeared. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, he was still 6'1", still broad across the shoulders from years of lifting timber and drywall, but something interior had contracted. His posture curved inward. His eyes, which I had always dismissed as dull and passive, were ringed with purple exhaustion. His right forearm was wrapped in gauze, the scissors wound still healing. He sat down on the metal stool, picked up the phone on his side of the glass, and looked at me without expression. I lifted my receiver. For the first time in my adult life, I had no opening statement prepared. "Ethan," I said. His name felt strange in my mouth. In 6 years I had spoken it perhaps 40 times, always with a thin coating of contempt. Always as though the 2 syllables were beneath me. He waited, patient. The way Mabel had described absorbing, holding, enduring. "I came to tell you that I know," I said. "I know what happened. I know what Simone did. I know you tried to protect my wife. and I know that My voice failed. I pressed the receiver harder against my ear, as though that might help. It did not. I know that I am responsible for part of what happened to you in this place. My statement to Detective Reyes confirmed Simone's accusation. I gave them the weight of a retired judge's certainty. I made it easier for them to hold you. Ethan's jaw tightened. A muscle in his cheek moved once, twice. He blinked slowly. Then he spoke, and his voice was hoarse, whether from disuse or emotion, I could not tell. How is she? Not why are you here? Not do you know what I have endured? Not you owe me. His first question was about Mabel, the woman he had tried to save, the woman whose fall he had been blamed for. She is awake, I said. Talking. The doctors are cautiously optimistic. There may be lasting damage to her left hip and her short-term memory, but she is alive. She told me everything, Ethan. Everything. He closed his eyes. His chest expanded with a single deep breath, the first full breath I had seen him take since he sat down. Relief. Not for himself. For her. I tried to catch her, he said, eyes still closed. I was at the top of the stairs. Simone had the phone. She had thrown it already. I reached for your wife's arm. I got her sleeve. It tore. I could not hold her. He opened his eyes. They were wet but controlled. I keep hearing the sound. Every night in here. The sound of her hitting those steps. I had no words adequate to this moment. 32 years of crafting sentences, verdicts, opinions, dissents, and none of my professional language contained a phrase sufficient for what I needed to say to this man. Your lawyer, I managed. Victoria Soto is working on your case. She has the recording. She has the financial evidence. She has Mabel's statement. She is filing a motion to dismiss all charges against you by end of week. Ethan nodded slowly. And Simone? There it was. The question I had been dreading since I walked through the jail's front entrance. Not because I did not know the answer, but because speaking it aloud meant making it irreversibly real. My daughter. My only child. The girl I had carried on my shoulders at the Virginia State Fair. The girl whose law school graduation I had attended with a pride so large it felt architectural, like a cathedral built inside my chest. Simone will be arrested, I said. Assault. Attempted murder. Fraud. Financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Each charge landed in the air, between us, like a gavel strike. Victoria estimates 15 to 25 years, depending on plea negotiations. Ethan looked down at the metal counter beneath the glass partition. His wrapped forearm rested there, the gauze slightly yellowed at the edges. When he looked up again, there was no satisfaction in his face, no vindication, only a sadness so deep it seemed geological, layered over years, compressed by silence and sacrifice. I loved her, he said. I need you to know that. I did not stay because I was weak. I stayed because I loved her, and I believed she could get better. Every time she lost money, every time she screamed, every time she threw something, I thought, this is the bottom. This is where she turns around. He paused. There was no bottom. I pressed my palm flat against the glass. A foolish gesture, he could not feel it, and I knew that. But I needed the contact, even simulated. Even through a barrier. I misjudged you, I said. From the first day Simone brought you home. I looked at your hands and saw calluses, and decided you were less than. I heard your silence and called it ignorance. I used my education and my title as a measure of human worth, and by that measure I found you lacking. I was wrong. Profoundly, completely, unforgivably wrong. Ethan studied me through the glass. Then, slowly, he placed his own palm against the partition opposite mine. Fingers splayed, separated by half an inch of institutional acrylic. You are here, he said. That is not nothing. A guard appeared behind Ethan's shoulder. Visiting time. 5 minutes had passed since the warning buzzer. I had not heard it. Ethan stood, the phone still pressed to his ear. Tell Mabel I am glad she is awake, he said. Tell her the curtains she was making the fabric is still in the upstairs closet. Blue linen. She will know. Then he hung up the receiver and walked back toward the steel door. His shoulders, I noticed, were slightly less curved than when he had entered. 1/4 of an inch, perhaps. Imperceptible to anyone who had not spent 32 years measuring men. But I had, and I saw it. I sat in booth 7 for another 3 minutes after he was gone. The phone receiver hummed a dial tone against my ear. On the other side of the glass, the empty stool held the ghost of every assumption I had ever made about silent men and proved them all catastrophically wrong. Previously, Howard visited Ethan in Henrico County Jail, delivering a full apology and acknowledging 6 years of class-based prejudice. Ethan's first question was about Mabel's health. He described trying to catch Mabel on the stairs, confessed he stayed in the marriage out of love, and placed his palm against the glass opposite Howard's. Victoria Soto was filing a motion to dismiss all charges. Howard left the jail transformed, and the next step was inevitable. Victoria called me at 8:17 the following morning. Her voice carried the clipped efficiency I had grown accustomed to over the past week, but beneath it I detected something else, a tightness that suggested even she, a woman who had defended murderers and rapists without flinching, found what was coming distasteful. The motion to dismiss was granted 40 minutes ago, she said. Ethan walks out at noon. The Commonwealth's attorney has reviewed the evidence package, Clarence's recording. Dr. Cho's authentication report, Mabel's sworn statement, the financial records. She is convening a grand jury tomorrow morning. But between us, Howard, that is a formality. The indictment will come today. They are sending detectives to your daughter's house within the hour. I was standing in my kitchen. The coffee I had poured sat untouched on the counter, steam rising in a thin spiral that reminded me, absurdly, of the waveform on Clarence's monitor. I set down the mug carefully, as though it might shatter. I want to be there, I said. Howard, I am not asking as her father. I am asking as Mabel's husband. I need to see this. Victoria was silent for 3 seconds. Then, I will call Reyes. Do not interfere. Do not speak to Simone. Stand on the sidewalk and witness. That is all. I drove to Wisteria Lane for the 3rd time in 12 days. Each visit had peeled back another layer, first the crisis, then the evidence, now the consequence. The street looked offensively normal in the late morning light. A lawn crew worked 3 houses down, the drone of their mower filling the air with the smell of cut grass. A FedEx truck idled at the corner. Clarence's garage door was closed today. I parked across the street and waited. At 9:51, 2 unmarked sedans turned onto Wisteria Lane, followed by a patrol car. They moved without sirens, without urgency, the calm, procedural approach of law enforcement, executing a warrant they knew would not be contested. Detective Reyes stepped out of the lead vehicle. He adjusted his jacket, checked something on his phone, and then looked across the street directly at me. He nodded once. Acknowledgement. Permission. Stay there. 3 officers approached the front door. Reyes rang the bell. 20 seconds passed. 30. Then the door opened, and there was my daughter. Simone was wearing a gray cardigan over a white t-shirt. Her hair was pulled back. No makeup. She looked young, younger than 36, younger than a woman who had pushed her mother down a staircase 16 days ago. She looked like the girl who used to sit on my lap in my chambers after school, spinning in my desk chair, asking me what habeas corpus meant. I watched her face cycle through expressions in rapid sequence. Confusion, recognition of the detective, a flash of something rehearsed concern, manufactured worry, and then, as Reyes spoke words I could not hear from across the street, a slow collapse. Not dramatic, not theatrical. A quiet crumbling, like dry earth sliding down an embankment. She stepped backward into the foyer. An officer followed. Reyes continued speaking, reading rights, I assumed, from the cadence of his voice. Then Simone's head turned. She looked past Reyes, past the officers, past the patrol car on her driveway, and found me standing on the sidewalk across the street. Our eyes met across 40 feet of asphalt and autumn air. In her gaze, I saw something I had seen 1,000 times from the bench. The exact moment when a defendant realizes that the story they constructed, the lie they maintained, the version of reality they attempted to impose upon the world, has failed completely and irrevocably. I had always felt a grim satisfaction when I witnessed that moment in my courtroom, a confirmation that the system worked, that truth was heavier than deception. I felt no satisfaction now. Only a weight so vast it seemed to press the sidewalk beneath my feet into something softer than concrete. Simone opened her mouth. From across the street, I could not hear what she said, but I could read her lips with the clarity of a father who had watched that mouth form its first word 34 years ago. Daddy. One word. The same word she had spoken at age 2, reaching up from her crib. The same word she had whispered at 16 when I caught her shoplifting and drove her home in silence. The same word, a key she had always known would unlock me, would soften me, would bend my judgment in her favor. I did not move. I did not cross the street. I stood on that sidewalk and watched an officer guide my daughter's hands behind her back. Watched the handcuffs close the same chrome-plated mechanism I had ordered placed on hundreds of wrists over 3 decades. Watched her head lowered into the back seat of the patrol car, with the practiced gentleness that officers reserve for suspects who are not physically resisting. The door closed. Through the tinted rear window, I could see the outline of her head bowed forward, chin against chest. The posture of the convicted. I had seen it 1,000 times, and never once imagined I would see it framed by my own daughter's silhouette. Reyes crossed the street toward me. He stopped 3 feet away, hands in his coat pockets, and studied my face with the careful neutrality of a man who had learned never to assume what a family member was feeling. Charges are aggravated, malicious wounding, attempted murder in the 2nd degree, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and filing a false police report, he said. Bond hearing is tomorrow at 9. Given the severity and the flight risk assessment, I do not expect she will be granted bail. I nodded. My throat had closed to the diameter of a drinking straw. For what it is worth, Reyes added. Quieter now. Your cooperation accelerated this. The recording, the financial evidence, your wife's testimony, it built an airtight case in 16 days. That almost never happens. He extended his hand. I shook it, an automatic reflex, muscle memory from decades of courthouse corridors. Then he returned to his vehicle, and the small convoy pulled away from Wisteria Lane. The patrol car carrying my daughter turned left at the intersection and disappeared behind a row of Bradford pear trees. I stood on the sidewalk for 7 more minutes. The lawn crew finished their work 3 houses down, loaded their mower onto a trailer, and drove away. A cardinal landed on Clarence's mailbox, stayed for 2 seconds, and flew off toward the tree line. The street returned to its offensive normalcy, as though nothing had happened, as though the earth had not just shifted beneath an entire family. Then I walked to my car, sat in the driver's seat, placed both hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2, the position my father taught me in 1971, and cried for the first time in 26 years. Not for Simone, not for myself, for the version of her that never existed, the daughter I had invented in my mind, constructed from pride and projection, and loved with a ferocity that blinded me to everything she actually was. I cried for 3 minutes. Then I started the engine and drove to the jail to bring Ethan home. Previously, Victoria's motion to dismiss was granted, and Ethan was ordered released at noon. A grand jury indicted Simone on 4 charges. Howard stood on the sidewalk and watched his daughter handcuffed, read her lips saying "Daddy," and did not move. He cried in his car for 3 minutes, mourning the invented daughter he had loved, then drove to Henrico County Jail to bring Ethan home. The release process took 2 hours and 14 minutes. I sat in the lobby on a molded plastic chair, the color of overcooked oatmeal, and watched other families collect their people. A young woman in nursing scrubs embracing a man who could not stop touching her hair, a grandmother signing paperwork with trembling hands, a teenage boy standing alone near the vending machines waiting for someone who never came. This was the other side of the system I had served for 32 years. The waiting side. The side with no gavels, no robes, no elevated bench. At 2:17, a steel door opened, and Ethan walked out carrying a clear plastic bag containing his belongings, a wallet, a phone with a shattered screen, a leather belt, and a wedding ring. He wore the same flannel shirt and work jeans from 16 days earlier, sawdust still caught in the boot stitching. He stopped 6 feet from me and stood still. Neither of us spoke for 10 seconds. Then, "Thank you for coming." The simplicity of it struck me harder than anger would have. I had prepared myself for anger. I deserved anger. Yet here he stood, offering the grace I had never extended to him in 6 years. "My car is outside," I said. "Mabel wants to see you." We drove in silence. Ethan sat with his head tilted toward the window, watching Richmond pass brick row houses along Broad Street, the James River flashing between buildings, dogwood trees dropping crimson leaves. Halfway to the hospital, his fingers found the wedding ring inside the plastic bag. He turned it over twice, then placed it on the dashboard without putting it on. "I cannot wear it yet," he said. "I do not know what it means anymore." I understood. The ring represented a promise made to Simone, honored for 6 years, while she systematically violated every aspect of it. Wearing it now would be loyalty to a lie, or a reminder of misplaced faith. "You do not have to decide today," I said. We reached VCU Medical Center at 3:40. I guided Ethan through corridors I had memorized, past the cafeteria, past the chapel where I had sat once and found no comfort, past the nursing station where Dolores nodded without requiring conversation. Mabel's room was at the end of the hall. Door open. She was propped on pillows, silver hair combed neatly, a book on her lap she was not reading. She was watching the door, waiting. Ethan stopped at the threshold. His hand gripped the door frame, the unconscious gesture of a carpenter checking a structure's integrity before entering. Then Mabel looked up, and her face did something I had not seen since before the attack. It opened. Every guarded expression dissolved, and what remained was pure, uncompromised relief. "Oh," she said, one syllable carrying everything. Ethan crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt beside her bed, not carefully, not gracefully, but with the sudden urgency of a man who had held himself together for 16 days and could not hold 1 second longer. He pressed his forehead against her knuckles. His shoulders shook once, twice. Then stillness. Mabel placed her free hand on the back of his head, fingers moving through his hair with the tenderness of a mother. And I realized, standing in the doorway, that this was precisely what she had become to him. His own mother died when he was 19. Mabel had filled that absence quietly, without announcement, the way she did everything important. "I am sorry I could not catch you," Ethan whispered. "Hush," Mabel said. "You tried. That is more than enough." I remained in the doorway. A witness, not a judge, not an authority. A witness to a bond I had spent 6 years dismissing as impossible, as beneath my family's station, as the delusion of a simple man. Watching Ethan kneel at my wife's bedside, I understood that my refusal to see his love as real was perhaps the cruelest of all my errors. After 3 minutes, Ethan stood, wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, and pulled a chair to the bedside. They talked quietly her therapy schedule, the surgeon's timeline, whether she preferred the window open or closed, ordinary things, the scaffolding of daily life reassembling around wreckage. I took the chair on the opposite side. Mabel reached for my hand without interrupting her conversation with Ethan. The 3 of us sat connected by touch, by survival, by the slow work of rebuilding trust, while October sun traced its arc across the floor, and machines beeped their steady confirmation that she was still here. At 5:30, a nurse brought 3 dinner trays without being asked. She had seen us arrive together and drawn her own conclusion. I looked at the institutional meatloaf, green beans, plastic cup of juice, and thought, this is what family looks like now. Not a Thanksgiving table, not a Christmas portrait. 3 people in a hospital room eating bad food and learning, 1 sentence at a time, how to be honest with each other. It was not what I had planned for my 71st year, but it was true. And after a lifetime in a profession that dealt exclusively in truth, I was only now learning what the word actually cost. Ethan was released from Henrico County Jail after 16 days. Howard drove him to VCU Medical Center, where Ethan knelt at Mabel's bedside, whispering, "I am sorry I could not catch you." The three of them shared hospital dinner trays, a new family unit forged from wreckage. The wedding ring sat on Howard's dashboard, unworn. Now, 2 months later, the trial begins. The trial of Simone Elaine Palmer Reed began on a Monday in December, in courtroom 4B of the Richmond Circuit Court, a room I had presided over for 11 years before my reassignment to the appellate division in 2009. I knew every scratch on the judge's bench. I knew the exact angle at which afternoon light entered through the western windows. I knew which chair at the defense table wobbled on its front left leg. I had spent a decade in that room believing I understood justice. Now I sat in the gallery's third row, a spectator in the theater I once commanded, and understood nothing. The Commonwealth's attorney, a woman named Patricia Vance, was methodical and unhurried. She had built her career on domestic violence cases, and she approached Simone's prosecution with the precision of a watchmaker, each piece of evidence placed in sequence, each witness called, at the exact moment their testimony would carry maximum weight. She opened with the physical evidence. Photographs of the staircase, 14 steps, hardwood, a blood smear beginning at step 11 and ending at the tile foyer below. The shattered phone recovered from the wall behind the living room sofa, its screen cracked in a starburst pattern consistent with high-velocity impact. The fabric scissors, 7-inch blades. Mabel's initials engraved on the handle with Ethan's blood, confirmed by DNA analysis on the left cutting edge. Then the financial evidence. Victoria Soto had arranged for a forensic accountant named Dr. Caroline Marsh to testify. She walked the jury through 18 months of brokerage statements, 27 leveraged crypto trades, 14 margin calls, $214,000 dissolved into the digital void. She showed the systematic drain of the joint checking account. She showed the $41,000 lost in the 72 hours between Simone receiving Mabel's letter and the night of the attack. The jury, 7 women, 5 men, watched the numbers accumulate on the courtroom screen, with expressions that shifted from confusion to disbelief to quiet fury. On the second day, Detective Reyes testified. He described arriving at the scene, finding Ethan with a lacerated forearm and Simone without a mark on her body. He described Clarence Odom's initial statement and the conflicting accounts. He described the 16 days Ethan spent in custody, based on Simone's accusation, and Howard Palmer's corroborating statement. When Reyes said my name, I felt the gallery's attention shift toward me, a subtle rotation of heads, a collective intake of breath. The retired judge who had confirmed his own daughter's lie. I kept my eyes forward. I had earned whatever judgment that room held for me. On the third day, Clarence Odom took the stand. He wore a charcoal suit I had never seen him, in a man who lived in work shirts and cargo pants, dressed now for the formality this moment demanded. Patricia Vance walked him through his credentials. 30 years in professional audio engineering, Grammy. Nominated mixing work. 14 prior testimonies as an expert witness in federal and state courts. Then she asked him to describe his equipment, his recording methodology, and the events of October 17th. Clarence spoke the way he did everything precisely, without embellishment, each sentence constructed for clarity rather than drama. He described the Neumann U87 microphone. He described the 48 kilohertz, 24-bit capture rate. He described hearing the first raised voice at approximately 10:47 in the evening and pressing record at 10:48. Then Vance played the recording. 9 minutes and 31 seconds. The courtroom sat in absolute silence. Not the restless, shifting silence of boredom, but the compressed, airless silence of 12 people hearing something that cannot be unheard. Simone's voice demanding money. Ethan's calm attempts to de-escalate. The crash. The scissors. Mabel's plea from the top of the stairs. The struggle. The 5 sequential impacts of a body falling, and then the moment that turned the jury's faces to stone. Simone's voice, shifting from rage to calculated performance in less than 2 seconds. Oh God. Ethan, what did you do? I watched the jurors. I had spent 3 decades reading juries, their posture, their breathing, the direction of their gaze. In that moment, I saw 12 people arrive simultaneously at the same conclusion. Not gradually, not through deliberation, but instantly. The recording did what recordings do. It bypassed argument, bypassed interpretation, bypassed reasonable doubt. It simply showed the truth, naked and undeniable. Simone's defense attorney, a public defender named Thomas Waite, did what he could. He challenged the recording's chain of custody. Dr. Nathan Cho dismantled that challenge in 4 minutes with authentication data. Waite suggested the audio was ambiguous, that "what did you do" could have been genuine shock rather than fabrication. Vance replayed the 2 seconds before and after the phrase, isolating the tonal shift from fury to performance. Even Waite seemed to recognize the futility. His shoulders dropped a quarter inch. On the 4th day, Mabel testified. She entered the courtroom in a wheelchair, her left hip still awaiting surgery, pushed by Ethan, who then took a seat in the front row of the gallery. She raised her right hand and swore to tell the truth. Then she described, in the same flat and exhausted tone she had used in her hospital room, exactly what her daughter had done. I watched Simone during Mabel's testimony. My daughter sat at the defense table in a navy blouse, her hands folded, her face carefully arranged into an expression of controlled sorrow. But her eyes, I knew those eyes, had looked into them for 36 years. Her eyes moved too quickly, calculating, measuring, searching the jury's faces for weakness, the way a trader searches a chart for entry points. She found none. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and 47 minutes. They returned a verdict of guilty on all 4 counts: aggravated malicious wounding, attempted second-degree murder, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and filing a false police report. Simone stood motionless as the foreperson read each count. She did not look at me. She did not look at Mabel. She looked at the table in front of her, and I could not read what was behind her eyes. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps everything. A father should know. This father did not. Sentencing was scheduled for January. The judge, a woman named Clara Washington, whom I had mentored 15 years ago, indicated a range of 18 to 25 years based on sentencing guidelines. Simone was remanded to custody, without bail pending sentencing. As the courtroom emptied, Ethan pushed Mabel's wheelchair toward the exit. I followed 3 steps behind. At the door, Mabel reached back and found my hand. She squeezed once the same deliberate pressure she had used on the day she woke from her coma. Outside, December air hit my face like cold water. The courthouse steps I had climbed thousands of times, felt foreign beneath my feet. I was no longer the man who had climbed them in a robe. I was the man who had sat in the 3rd row and watched his family disassemble under fluorescent light. And now I had to learn what came after. The 4-day trial ended with Simone found guilty on all 4 counts: aggravated malicious wounding, attempted second-degree murder, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and filing a false police report. The recording played in court. Mabel testified from a wheelchair pushed by Ethan. Judge Clara Washington indicated a sentencing range of 18 to 25 years. Simone was remanded without bail. Howard left the courthouse a spectator in the theater he once commanded. Sentencing was on January 14th, a Tuesday. I remember because Mabel had her second physical therapy session that morning, and I debated whether to cancel it. She refused. "I will not rearrange my healing around her consequences," she said, adjusting the walker she had graduated to 3 weeks earlier. "Take me to therapy first, then take me to court." So I did. At 7:45, I drove Mabel to the rehabilitation clinic on Carey Street, where a therapist named Jerome guided her through 40 minutes of hip-strengthening exercises. At 9:15, I helped her into the car. At 9:50, we entered courtroom 4B for the second and final time. The room was fuller than during the trial. Word had spread through the legal community, through local news, through the particular gravity that attaches to cases involving fallen judges and violent daughters. I recognized 5 former colleagues in the gallery. 3 avoided my eyes. 2 nodded. I could not determine which response I preferred. Simone was brought in at 10:05. She wore the same navy blouse from the trial, pressed clean, as though the jail had honored her request for appearance. Her hair was pulled back tightly. No earrings, no makeup. She looked smaller than she had in December. 16 pounds lighter. I estimated a judge's habit of measuring people by observable data that I could not shed even now. Judge Washington entered at 10:15. She was 53 years old. I had hired her as a law clerk in 2007, recommended her for the bench in 2015. She had been a brilliant student of judicial temperament. Watching her settle into her chair with practiced authority, I felt an emotion I could not name, pride tangled with something darker, the recognition that my professional legacy would now be permanently associated with this courtroom, this case, this daughter. Washington addressed Simone directly. Miss Palmer-Reed, before I deliver the sentence, you have the right to make a statement. Do you wish to speak? Simone stood. Her attorney, Thomas Waite, placed a hand on her arm, either support or restraint. I could not tell. She looked at the judge, then at the gallery, then for the first time since her arrest directly at me. I want to say that I am sorry, she said. Her voice was controlled, rehearsed. I had heard thousands of defendant statements from the bench, and I could categorize them within the first three words: genuine, performed, or somewhere between. Simone's fell into the second category with such precision that it made my chest ache. Even now, convicted, exposed, stripped of every lie, she could not stop performing. I am sorry for what happened to my mother. I am sorry for what happened to Ethan. I take full responsibility. She sat down. 14 words of apology. No explanation. No acknowledgement of the gambling. No mention of the money. No recognition that what happened was something she had done with her own hands. Not an event that occurred passively. Not weather. Not accident. I gripped Mabel's hand. She squeezed back. Washington reviewed the pre-sentencing report, the victim impact statements, Mabel's written account, Ethan's 3-paragraph letter that I had watched him write at our kitchen table, erasing and rewriting the same sentence for 40 minutes, and the Commonwealth's sentencing recommendation. Then she spoke. Miss Palmer-Reed, the evidence presented at trial established beyond reasonable doubt that you attacked your husband with a deadly weapon, causing bodily harm, that you then physically assaulted your 69-year-old mother, pushing her down a 14-step staircase, causing traumatic brain injury, a fractured hip, and injuries that will affect her for the remainder of her life, that you fabricated a false accusation against your husband, resulting in his wrongful incarceration for 16 days, and that you systematically exploited your parents' financial trust over a period of 18 months to fund a gambling addiction you concealed from every person who loved you. Washington paused. The courtroom was silent, except for the scratch of a court reporter's keys. The court has considered mitigating factors: your lack of prior felony convictions, your age, and your expressed remorse. The court has also considered aggravating factors: the vulnerability of the victim, the premeditation evident in the false accusation, the duration and scale of the financial exploitation, and the significant physical and psychological harm suffered by multiple victims. She removed her reading glasses. A gesture I recognized. I had done the same thing before delivering heavy sentences. A way of looking directly at the defendant, without the barrier of lenses, without anything between your eyes and theirs. On count 1, aggravated malicious wounding, 12 years. On count 2, attempted murder in the second degree, 8 years. On count 3, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, 5 years. On count 4, filing a false police report, 2 years. Counts 1 and 2 to run concurrently. Counts 3 and 4 to run consecutively. I calculated instantly. 12 years concurrent with 8, plus 5, plus 2. Total, 19 years. Eligible for parole consideration after serving 65% under Virginia sentencing guidelines. 12 years and 4 months before the possibility of release. Washington continued. The defendant is remanded to the Virginia Department of Corrections to begin serving her sentence immediately. Court is adjourned. The gavel struck once, a sound I had produced thousands of times, a sound that had always felt like resolution, the clean, definitive end of uncertainty. Now it sounded like a door closing on something I could never reopen. Officers flanked Simone. She stood, straightened her blouse in automatic gesture, the vanity of a woman who had always cared about appearance, and turned toward the side exit that led to the holding cells. At the door, she paused, looked back over her shoulder. Not at me. Not at Mabel. At Ethan. He sat 3 seats to my left, his hands resting on his thighs, his face carrying the same expression I had seen through the jail's acrylic partition. Sadness without satisfaction. Loss without vindication. Simone held his gaze for 2 seconds. Then she turned and walked through the door, and was gone. I looked at Ethan. His jaw was tight, his eyes dry. His right hand moved unconsciously to his left forearm where the scissors wound had healed into a 4-inch scar he would carry for the rest of his life. He did not speak. Mabel leaned toward me, her walker braced against the pew in front of us. "Take me home," she whispered. "Not the hospital." "Home." I nodded. Outside, January air pressed against the courthouse doors, colder than December, sharper, the kind of cold that clarifies. I held the door for Mabel. Ethan held the door for me. 3 people walking out of a courtroom into whatever came next, carrying 19 years of sentence between them, like a weight distributed unevenly across 3 sets of shoulders. Mabel bore the physical damage. Ethan bore the scar. And I bore the knowledge that I had helped build the person who did this through privilege, through blindness, through a love so undisciplined, it became permission. The drive home took 22 minutes. Nobody spoke. The wedding ring still sat on my dashboard where Ethan had placed it 2 months ago. It had not moved. Neither had his decision. Judge Clara Washington sentenced Simone to 19 years 12 for aggravated malicious wounding, concurrent with 8 for attempted murder, plus 5 for financial exploitation, and 2 for the false report, running consecutively. Simone's final glance went to Ethan, not Howard. The family left the courthouse together. Mabel whispered, "Take me home," and the wedding ring remained unmoved on Howard's dashboard. We sold the house on Grove Avenue in March. 4 bedrooms, 2 stories, a staircase with 17 steps that Mabel could no longer climb without triggering the memory of 14 different steps in a different house. I did not argue. I did not suggest modifications, a stair lift, a railing, a ramp. I understood that the problem was not architectural. The problem was what staircases now meant in the vocabulary of our family. They meant falling. They meant hands prying fingers from wood. They meant the sound of a body striking steps 1 through 5, and then silence. Ethan found the new house. Of course he did. He was a carpenter, a man who reads structures the way I read legal briefs. He spent 3 weeks searching, driving across Richmond and into the surrounding counties, evaluating foundations, measuring doorways, testing floors for the kind of levelness that a woman with a healing hip and a fractured sense of safety would need. He found it in Midlothian, a single-story ranch on a half-acre lot, built in 1987 and renovated once in 2011. 3 bedrooms, no stairs, a wide hallway, a bathroom with grab bars already installed by the previous owner, an elderly man who had died peacefully in his sleep at 91. "It has good bones," Ethan said when he showed me the listing. We were sitting at my kitchen table, a table that had become our shared workspace over the preceding months. His laptop opened to the real estate page. My reading glasses perched on the bridge of my nose. 2 mugs of coffee between us, his black, mine with the precise amount of cream Mabel had taught me to pour 30 years ago. Good bones was a phrase I had heard him use before, in the early years of his marriage to Simone. When he described projects to me at family dinners, I had dismissed it as the limited vocabulary of a man without formal education. Now I understood it as precision, a carpenter's diagnostic language, stripped of decoration, communicating exactly what mattered and nothing else. The house had good bones. Its structure was sound. It would hold us. We closed on April 3rd. Ethan handled the renovation himself, 3 weeks of work that transformed a dated ranch house into something that felt, improbably, like home. He widened the bathroom doorway to accommodate Mabel's walker. He installed a roll-in shower with a teak bench he built from reclaimed wood. He replaced every doorknob with lever handles, easier for arthritic fingers, easier for hands that sometimes trembled when they reached for things. He built a raised garden bed outside the kitchen window because Mabel had mentioned, once, in passing, that she missed growing tomatoes. I helped where I could, which was not much. I painted 2 bedrooms poorly, with visible brush strokes that Ethan quietly corrected after I went to bed. I assembled furniture from boxes, following instructions that seemed designed to humiliate men who had spent their careers with words rather than tools. I carried boxes from the moving truck until my lower back informed me, in no uncertain terms, that 71-year-old spines have limits. Ethan moved into the 3rd bedroom. We did not discuss it formally. There was no family meeting, no negotiation of terms. He simply arrived on moving day with 2 duffel bags and a toolbox, placed them in the smallest bedroom at the end of the hall, and began installing shelves. The arrangement was unspoken but understood. He was not a guest. He was not a charity case. He was family redefined, restructured, built on different foundations than blood or marriage. His wedding ring never returned to his finger. I found it one evening in a small wooden box on his nightstand. A box he had made himself, walnut with a maple inlay. He had built a container for the thing he could not wear and could not discard. I said nothing. Some decisions belong entirely to the person making them. Mabel healed. Not completely, her left hip would never be what it was, and certain words occasionally escaped her in conversation, hovering just beyond reach before returning seconds later. But she healed in the ways that mattered. She walked without the walker by May. She cooked dinner 3 nights a week by June, standing at the stove Ethan had installed at a height calibrated to her frame, stirring pots with the same wooden spoon she had used for 40 years. She laughed. Not often at first, then more frequently, then with the full-bodied sound I remembered from decades earlier, before the money, before the secret, before everything heavy. I learned new rhythms. Morning coffee with Ethan on the back porch, watching cardinals visit the feeder he had mounted on a post he carved himself. Afternoon walks with Mabel through the neighborhood's slow, deliberate loops that grew longer each week. Evening meals at a table set for 3, where conversation moved at the pace of people who had stopped pretending and started simply being present. I also learned what I had lost. Not Simone, she was alive, incarcerated, reachable by mail. What I had lost was the architecture of my own identity. For 71 years, I had been a judge, a man who sorted the world into categories, who assigned value based on education, diction, profession, pedigree. That man was gone, demolished as thoroughly as if Ethan had taken a sledgehammer to his foundations. What remained was someone simpler, someone who painted walls badly, and assembled furniture with leftover screws, and sat on a porch watching birds with a man he had once considered beneath him. I was not unhappy. That surprised me. I had expected grief, the consuming, theatrical grief of a patriarch whose dynasty had collapsed. Instead, I found something quieter, something that resembled, if I was honest with myself, relief. The exhausting performance of certainty was over. I no longer had to know everything. I no longer had to be right. I could simply be present in a single-story house with good bones, with a wife who was healing, with a son-in-law who had forgiven me without requiring me to earn it. On a Thursday evening in late June, Mabel and I sat on the back porch while Ethan grilled chicken in the yard. The sun was low golden, diffused through the pin oaks that lined our property. Mabel held my hand loosely, her thumb tracing the same absent pattern on my knuckles that she had traced for 45 years. "Are you all right?" she asked. Not about the evening, not about dinner, about everything. I considered the question with the care it deserved. Then I said, "I am learning to be." She nodded. That was enough. The family sold the Grove Avenue house and moved to a single-story ranch in Midlothian that Ethan found and renovated. He moved into the 3rd bedroom family by choice, not obligation. Mabel healed, walked without her walker by May, cooked by June. Howard learned new rhythms and discovered relief in the collapse of his old identity. I am learning to be, he told Mabel on a June evening. The letter arrived on a Saturday in August, 11 months after the attack. I was in the kitchen making coffee, the slow pour-over method Ethan had taught me, when I heard the mailbox close. A sound so ordinary it should have carried no weight. But that morning, it did. Ethan was outside restaining the porch railing. I heard his footsteps on the gravel path, then a pause long enough that I looked through the kitchen window. He stood at the mailbox holding a single envelope, his body completely still. The stillness of a man who recognizes handwriting he hoped never to see again. He placed it on the kitchen table without a word. Standard prison issue envelope. Return address: Virginia Correctional Center for Women, Goochland, Virginia. Upper left corner, careful blue ink. S. Palmer, read. Mabel appeared in the hallway. She had heard the silence, the specific quality of quiet that fills a house when something unwelcome arrives. She sat in the chair nearest the window, looked at the envelope, and waited. It was addressed to all three of us: Howard, Mabel, and Ethan Palmer. 1847. Clearbrook Lane, Midlothian, VA 23113. She knew our new address. Seeing our names grouped in her handwriting, the three of us, combined by the person who had tried to destroy us, produced something between nausea and sorrow. Together, Ethan said. Or not at all. I opened it. 2 pages. Both sides filled. Blue ink. Careful script. Every letter formed with the precision of someone who had nothing but time. Dear Dad, Mom, and Ethan, I have written this letter 11 times. The first 10 I burned because they were full of excuses disguised as explanations. This is the version with no disguise. I am an addict. Not was. Am. The counselor here says the first step is present tense, owning what you are, not relegating it to the past like a phase you outgrew. Mom, I pushed you. Not in a moment of madness. I pushed you because you stood between me and money I had already spent in my mind 14 times over. I pushed you with both hands and watched you fall. And my first thought was not horror. My first thought was, now what do I tell them? I need you to know this, because anything less than the full truth is just another trade exchanging honesty for comfort. Ethan, I framed you, deliberately. I looked at your bleeding arm and saw an opportunity. A narrative I could build in 30 seconds. I did not hesitate. I chose to ruin your life to save mine. I failed. Dad, I used your love against you. I knew you would believe me over Ethan. I knew your prejudice would do my work for me. I counted on it. That is perhaps the most honest thing I have ever said to you. I stopped reading. My vision blurred not from tears, though those were close, but from the disorientation of hearing my daughter speak without performance for what might have been the first time in her life. I blinked. Continued. I am not writing to ask for forgiveness. My counselor says that is a word I should not use for at least 2 years, because I do not yet understand what it costs the person granting it. I am writing to tell you what I am doing. Addiction recovery 3 times a week. Working in the prison library. Reading books about financial trauma. And narcissistic behavior books that describe me so precisely. I have to close them sometimes and breathe. I do not expect a response. I do not deserve one. But I wanted you to know that something is growing beside the person who did those things. I do not know if it will succeed. Simone. The kitchen was quiet. Outside, a cardinal landed on Ethan's feeder, red against green. Life continuing its indifferent beauty regardless of what lay on our table. Mabel placed one hand flat on the letter, palm down, fingers spread, as though taking its temperature. She is telling the truth, she said finally. For the first time, I can feel it. Ethan's hand moved to the scar on his forearm. He traced its length once, then dropped his hand. I know, he said. They both looked at me. The retired judge. The man whose life had been built on rendering verdicts. What was my verdict now? I looked at the letter, at my daughter's handwriting, at the cardinal, at Ethan's scar, at Mabel's wet eyes. I do not know what to do with this, I said. The most honest sentence I had spoken in 71 years. Mabel nodded. Then we will figure it out. Together. There is no deadline. She folded the letter carefully, not crumpling, not burning, and placed it in the kitchen drawer beside the phone book, and the takeout menus, and the small notepad where we kept grocery lists, among ordinary things, where it could wait until we were ready. If we ever were. On a Sunday morning in October 1 year and 3 days after the attack, I sat on the back porch with a cup of coffee and watched Ethan build a pergola. He had been working on it for 2 weekends, measuring and cutting cedar beams with the unhurried precision I had once mistaken for slowness. The structure was taking shape above Mabel's raised garden bed, a frame that would support wisteria vines she had planted in May, and that were already climbing the first post, with the quiet determination of living things, seeking light. Mabel was inside. I could hear her through the open kitchen window, the sound of a whisk against a metal bowl, the radio playing something with horns and piano that she hummed along to imperfectly. She was making her cornbread, the recipe she learned from her mother in 1974, and had made every Sunday since, with 2 exceptions. The Sunday after Marcus died, and every Sunday she spent in the hospital. The rhythm had returned. That mattered more than I could articulate. I had been thinking about the letter. Not constantly. It no longer consumed my waking hours the way it had in August, but persistently, the way a stone sits in a shoe. Present. Unavoidable. Requiring eventual attention. 3 months had passed since we placed it in the kitchen drawer. None of us had mentioned it again. None of us had answered it. But none of us had thrown it away, and I had come to understand that this too was a form of communication. We were saying, "We received you. We are not ready. But we did not discard you, Howard." Ethan's voice from beneath the pergola. He was holding a beam against the crosspiece, his level balanced on top. "Can you hold this end for 30 seconds? I set down my coffee and walked across the yard. The grass was still damp with morning dew. It soaked through my slippers, cold against my feet. I positioned myself where Ethan pointed and held the beam steady while he drove 2 screws with his cordless drill. The vibration traveled through the wood into my palms. When he finished, he checked the level, nodded once, and said, "Thank you." Such a small thing. A man asking another man to hold a beam. But 12 months ago, Ethan would not have asked me. And 12 months ago, I would not have come. We had built something between us. Not friendship exactly, not the father-son relationship that television depicts with fishing trips and shoulder claps. Something less nameable. A mutual respect constructed one small request at a time. One held beam, one shared coffee, one evening of silence on the porch that required no filling. I returned to my chair. Ethan resumed cutting. The saw sang its brief, clean note through cedar, and I thought about legacies. For 32 years, my legacy was jurisprudence. Opinions I had written that were cited in other courts. Precedents I had established. Young lawyers I had mentored, Clara Washington among them. I had believed that legacy was the sum of professional achievement. That what a man left behind was measured in case numbers and citations and the fear his name generated among unprepared attorneys. I no longer believed that. What I would leave behind was simpler and harder. A wife who had survived her daughter's violence and chosen to keep living with openness rather than bitterness. A son-in-law who had been wrongly imprisoned and responded not with revenge but with cedar pergolas and grab bars, and a patience so vast it shamed me daily. And somewhere in Goochland, a daughter who was perhaps, possibly, without guarantee learning to be honest for the first time in her adult life. I had also done something concrete. In June, Mabel and I established the Marcus Webb Memorial Foundation, funded by the trust she had hidden for 23 years. The money that had nearly destroyed our family would now serve a different purpose. Half went to a scholarship fund for children of first responders killed in the line of duty. Half went to a financial literacy and addiction recovery program. Mabel's insistence, and she was right. The foundation would not erase what happened. Nothing could. But it could redirect the current of that money from destruction toward something generative. Ethan served on the board. His title was Community Outreach Coordinator, which meant he drove to high schools across Virginia and told his story: the gambling debt that was not his, the false accusation, the 16 days in jail, the scar on his arm. He spoke plainly, without self-pity, without drama. The students listened in a way they never listened to men in suits. They listened because his hands were calloused and his voice was quiet, and his truth was simple. Someone else's addiction will try to consume you, if you let it. Do not let it. Mabel attended every speaking engagement. She sat in the back row of auditoriums and gymnasiums, her cane hooked over the seat beside her, and when Ethan finished, she stood, and the students saw physically, undeniably, what the end of that story looked like. A woman who survived. A woman still standing. I attended too. Not as a speaker. Not as a judge. As a man in the third row, the same position I had occupied in courtroom 4B. A witness. I was learning that witnessing was not a lesser role. It was, perhaps, the most important one: to see clearly, to resist the impulse to judge, to allow the truth to exist without immediately categorizing it, sentencing it, filing it away. On that October Sunday, Ethan finished the pergola by noon. He stood back and assessed his work, arms crossed, head tilted slightly, the posture of a craftsman measuring the distance between intention and result. Mabel came outside carrying 3 plates of cornbread, still warm. She handed one to Ethan, one to me, and kept one for herself. We stood together beneath the new structure, cedar overhead, wisteria beginning its slow climb, autumn sun filtering through the beams in parallel lines of gold. "It is good," Mabel said, looking up at the pergola. Ethan nodded. "It will hold." I bit into the cornbread. It tasted exactly as it always had: 45 years of the same recipe, the same hands, the same Sunday rhythm. And yet everything was different. The house was different. The family was different. I was different. We had been broken apart and reassembled into something less symmetrical, less expected, less perfect by any conventional standard, but stronger, load-bearing, built to hold. In the kitchen drawer, the letter waited. We would answer it eventually, or we would not. Both choices were acceptable. Both required the same thing: time, and the willingness to remain uncertain without that uncertainty destroying us. A judge demands verdicts. A man can learn to live without them. I finished my cornbread. Mabel collected the plates. Ethan began cleaning his tools, wiping sawdust from each one before returning it to its case with the care of a man who understood that the things you maintain will maintain you in return. The cardinal returned to its feeder. Red against October gold. A small, persistent life, doing what it was designed to do, arriving, eating, singing, returning. No performance, no deception, no hidden accounts or fabricated narratives. Just presence, just the honest repetition of being alive. I sat on the porch and watched it, and for the first time in 71 years, I did not feel the need to render a verdict on the day. I simply let it be.